This video could be called Fun with Segments because I'm going to show you how to do a variety of things given a segment and its endpoints. Specifically, I will show you how to find the slope of the segment, the length of the segment, the midpoint of the segment, and just to cap it off, I will show you how to partition or split the segment into a certain ratio. So first let's find the slope. We know that the slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so y minus y, so that's going to be 1 minus negative 3 over x minus x, so that's 7 minus negative 1. 7 minus negative 1. And we've learned that when you have minus and negative, it is really addition. So that's what we will do. So we will wind up with 4 over 8. And we will not leave it like this. We will definitely reduce down to 1/2. Alright, for full credit, you need to reduce. So this is the slope. Okay, now let's talk length. Now there's two ways to think about the length of segment AB. By the way, if I just write AB without a segment symbol over the top, it automatically means the length of AB. So one way to imagine the length of AB is to imagine the Pythagorean theorem. Imagine a triangle. Okay, now so the hypotenuse is the segment AB. So just imagine this is segment AB. It doesn't matter if it's really sloping the other way or something like that. In fact, I see it's a positive slope, so it should be. That doesn't matter. Instead, this is what I do. Look at the x values, -1 and 7. How far apart are they? Hopefully you can see that these will be 8 apart. So that means the horizontal portion of this little triangle will be 8. Okay? And if you don't automatically see the 8, it's because of this. On a number line, I've got, whoops, why am I making a 7? On a number line, I've got this -1 happening, and I've got +7. And somewhere between them, I have 0. So that's like 1 to the left, 7 to the right. That's a total of 8. Alright, hopefully you can do that in your head. In a similar way, now look at the y values, -3 and 1. Picture them on a number line and tell me how far apart they are. They are 4 apart. Okay, now, those are the y values, so that's the vertical part on this little diagram. So if I wanted to find the hypotenuse, that would be the Pythagorean theorem, right? If I call this c, then I would say that c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. But then to get c by itself, I would have to take the square root of both sides. So, and then that would give me the length. So that means AB is equal to the square root of 4 squared plus 8 squared. Okay, that is one way to think of this. Alright, and I could do this in my head, or I could use a calculator and do the square root of 4 squared plus 8 squared. Okay, so it's 4 radical 5. Okay, they said in exact form and as a decimal. So I said 4 radical 5. Maybe I'll save that for the next step. 4 squared is 16. 8 squared is 64. So if you add these together, you're going to get 80. So this is also the square root of 80. Okay, now as a decimal, I can just hit this button, and that is 8.944. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. Here's one other way of looking at it. There's something called the distance formula. So instead of looking at it as the Pythagorean theorem, I could think of it like this. The distance formula says that the distance will be the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, that's the distance formula. So I could just use that. So if I think of it that way, that's going to be my 7 minus negative 1 squared, 1 minus negative 3 squared. Okay. Now, remember earlier when I did 7 minus negative 1, I got 8. Okay, on the last problem. So that's going to be 8 squared. 1 minus negative 3 is really 1 plus 3, so that'll be 4 squared. And that's the same thing we got when we were thinking of it as the Pythagorean theorem. So the rest of the problem will be the same. Square root of 80, which is approximately equal to 8.944. So you can either use the distance formula or you can think of it as the Pythagorean theorem. Alright, now let's talk midpoint. Whenever I think about midpoint, I think, okay, it's going to be the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So that means x plus x divided by 2. Alright, that's the average of the x's. And it means y plus y divided by 2. Alright, because that's the average of the y's. So let's do that. The average of the x's, so that will be negative 1 plus 7 divided by 2. That's the average of the x's, comma, and then I will have negative 3 plus 1 divided by 2. That's the average of the y's. Alright, now what does this come out to be? Okay, so negative 1 plus 7, that's going to be 6 over 2. And negative 3 plus 1, that's negative 2 over 2. Alright, we certainly can't leave it like that. That's going to give us 3, comma, negative 1. So this is the midpoint of segment AB. Alright, next we are being asked to partition or split segment AB so that it has a ratio of 3 to 1. Now the order matters. So when they say AB, that means the A will be associated with the 3 and the B will be associated with the 1. So that means the larger part of the segment will be touching point A and the smaller part will be touching point B. Anyway, if for every 3 spaces we are from A, we are 1 space from B, what's the total number of spaces that I just mentioned? Well, that's a total of 4. That's important because as I move away from A, I'm going 3/4 of the way from A. As I move away from B, I'm going 1/4 of the way from B. Let's write down those important fractions that I just said. So we have 3/4 of the way from A. Okay, that's where our split will be. Or we will be 1/4 of the way from B. We can use either one of these whenever we want. Because we are dealing with x's and y's, my recommendation to you is diagram the x's and y's separately. So I'm going to deal with my x values over here. and I'm going to deal with my y values over here. Okay, so here is my segment, but only x values, and here is my segment where I will deal with the y values. So let's see, my x values are -1 and 7. So that's why I'm going to put a -1 and 7. But you know what? I think I'll put them underneath. So -1 and 7. And it's important to keep track of the fact that the -1 was point A and the 7 was point B. Now, the y values. I have -3 and 1. So I'll have -3 and 1. Okay, and that is point A and point B again. Okay, so my partition will be 3/4 of the way from A. So I can calculate from A or from B because I have both fractions. I like to move from left to right. It's just more comfortable for me. So I'm going to use the 3/4 from A. But in order to do it, I need to know how far is it from A to B the whole way? Well, the distance between -1 and 7 is 8. Okay, that's the whole way. What's the distance from -3 to 1? Well, that's 4. The whole way is 4. So, my partition is going to be 3/4 of the way from A. So that means 3/4 of 8. All right, what's that going to be? In my head, I'm going 4 goes into 8 twice. 2 times 3 is 6. So therefore, it's going to be 6. All right, if you're not comfortable with what I just said, if that sounded like gibberish to you, then you're going to simply multiply. So 3/4 times 8. Okay, and you get 6. Either way, that tells you how far from A you have to go. All right, so we're going 3/4 of the way. And we found out that that's 6. So that means I'm doing plus 6. I'm going 6 to the right. What is -1 plus 6? That is 5. So that is going to be the x value of my partition. My split. So let's do the same thing for the y values. I'm still going 3/4 of the way from A. So the question is, what is 3/4 of 4? Now I look at this and go, well, these 4's cancel each other out and I get 3. So I know it's going to be 3. If that seemed like some kind of witchcraft to you, then you would go 3/4 times 4. Oh, look, it's 3. So 3/4 of the way from A, in this case, means 3 units from A. All right, that's what we just found. So that means I'm going to add 3. I'm moving 3. Well, what's -3 plus 3? That is 0. So that is the y coordinate, the y value of my partition. Okay, so that means that the final answer is going to be 5, 0. All right, those are the coordinates of the partition. Those are the coordinates of the point that splits the segment into a ratio of 3 to 1. All right, let's do all that fun stuff one more time with a new segment, segment CD. So let's first find the slope. Hold on. All right, so the slope we decided was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y minus y, so that's going to be 9 minus -6. X minus x, so that's going to be 1 minus -4. All right, we long ago learned that minus and negative is addition. So that's going to give us 15 over 5, which is 3. So there's the slope. Now how about the length? So the length of CD can be given by just writing CD. All right, that automatically means the length of CD. And the formula is, all right, if I was just going to use the distance formula, it would be x minus x squared plus y minus y squared. All right, that's the distance formula. It's really just the Pythagorean theorem, which I showed on the previous problem. So anyway, x minus x squared. So that would be, again, it's the same thing that showed up in the slope, but it's so 1 minus negative 4 squared, and then 9 minus negative 6 squared. Okay, so this is really 1 plus 4, so that's going to be 5 squared. And this is really 9 plus 6, so that's going to be 15 squared. Okay, let's see, what is 5 squared plus 15 squared? 5 squared plus 15 squared. Alright, that's 250. So that's the square root of 250. Okay, let's see what would that be in simplified radical form. So the square root of 250 is 5 radical 10. Alright, so if you're doing a standardized test and you got the multiple choice, it might be written in this form, 5 radical 10. So you need to be comfortable with that. But let's go ahead and get the decimal. That's 15.811. So CD is approximately 15.811. So here are 3 different forms for the length of CD. Okay, next let's find the midpoint of segment CD. So remember, the midpoint is the average of the x's. So it's like x plus x divided by 2, that's the average of the x's, and then the average of the y's. So y plus y divided by 2, that's what we're doing. Alright, so the average of the x's. So I'm going to have negative 4 plus 1 divided by 2. And then the average of the y's. So negative 6 plus 9 divided by 2. So that's going to give me negative 3 over 2. And this is going to give me positive 3 over 2. Okay, so that's an answer right there if we just leave it in fraction form. Or we could have negative 1.5 comma 1.5. Alright, that's another form of the same answer. Okay, finally that leaves partitions. Alright, so let's practice this one more time. We want the point that partitions the segment or splits the segment into a 2:3 ratio. So let's focus our eyes on this 2:3 ratio. CD. That means the C goes with the 2 and the D goes with the 3. Alright, what's the total? 5. So that gives us 2 fractions, 2/5 and 3/5. So what this tells us is that our partition, our split, will be either 2/5 of the way from C, alright, because that's where the 2/5 is, or you can think of it as being 3/5 of the way from D. Either one, you can use whichever one is convenient. Because we have x's and y's in this problem, if I just scroll up, these are the points we're dealing with, x's and y's. Then we should deal with the x values and the y values separately. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so on the left side, I'm going to deal with the x values. And then on the right hand side, I'm going to deal with the y values. Okay, so here's a little number line for the x values, and here's a little number line for the y values. Let's see. So let me bring these points down. So my x values are -4 and 1. Okay, and that was point C. Whoops, I didn't mean to put them on. Alright, the 1 goes here. So that's C and D. These are x values. So I didn't mean to put it on the y value chart. So -4 and 1, that was point C and point D. Okay, now the y values were -6 and 9. Okay, so -6 and 9 are the y values. And again, that was point C and point D. So I always like to go from left to right. So I want to go from C and see how far I go. So that's why I'm going to end up using this fraction right here. 2/5 of the way from C, simply because I like to go from left to right. Okay, but first of all, I need to know how far apart these are anyway. How far is the whole way? Alright, from -4 to 1, those are 5 apart. Okay, what about from -6 to 9? From -6 to 9, those are 15 apart. That's the whole way. So when I say that I want to go 2/5 of the way, that means I need to go 2/5 of 5 in this case. And that means I need to go 2/5 of 15 in this case. Now when I look at this, I think to myself, the 5s cancel each other out. That's just going to leave 2. Now if you're not comfortable with that, then you're going to have to use a calculator or something. So 2/5 times 5, or of 5, is 2. Okay, now that tells me how far I need to go from C. So 2/5 of the way from C is 2 units. So that's how far I'm going to go. I'm just going to go 2 units, like dink. So I went 2 units, so I put a +2. -4 plus 2 is -2. So that is the x value of my partition. Similarly, the y values, I have to multiply 2/5 times 15. And when I look at this, I'm going to do 5 goes into 15 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6, so I know this is going to be a 6. Now, if that seemed like some kind of a voodoo to you, then you're going to have to use a calculator. So you would have to go 2/5 times 15, and of course you're going to get 6. So that tells us that we're going to have to go 6 units from C, so that's +6. -6 plus 6, that's 0. Kabam! So that is the y value of the partition. Putting the x value and the y value together, and you'll see that the partition point, the point that splits the segment into the ratio 2 to 3, is the point -2, 0. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Go ahead and click here in the red apple to watch the next video. Click in the green apple to subscribe, or click the yellow apple for the full playlist.